Hello everyone, welcome to the third and the last part of renal calculi. In this section, we'll discuss the diagnosis and management of renal calculi. For a quick recap, we have seen the classification, definition, also the clinical features and pathogenesis of development of renal calculi in part 1 and part 2 of this lecture. Now we'll continue with the diagnosis, which is very important, and also the management of how to take care of the patient suffering from renal calculi and how can we interfere into it. So the diagnosis of renal calculi, the diagnosis is made on the basis of the information obtained from history, physical examination, urine analysis and radiographic studies. So the history and physical examination says that the clinical diagnosis is usually made on the basis of the location and severity of the pain, which is typically colicky in nature, comes and go in spasmodic wave. We have discussed in section 2, second lecture of renal calculi, that this wave is a spasmodic wave which lasts for around 20 to 60 minutes. So this history is very important. With the patient presenting up that I had an episode few days back or yesterday or today, but now he is comfortable, he is not having any pain. So this counts into the history. Physical examination may reveal fever and tenderness as the costovertebral angle of the affected site. Now comes the urine analysis, which we have multifaceted discussion on urine analysis. It actually provides an excellent information about renal function and condition of the fluid and electrolyte. As we have seen into the pathogenesis, that we have seen the supersaturation of the urine was the mechanism involved in the development of renal calculi. So if we are going to understand, or we need to understand why did the renal calculi develop, we need to examine the urine. We also need to see into the urine the saturation level and the content of the electrolytes. That is, actually we are going to measure the osmolarity of urine in order to assess did or what was the reason behind formation of renal calculi. So usually urine analysis, which is normally considered for color, odor, consistency and related teaching, that is clean catch urine should be present. Known teaching of method and purpose, that is clean catch, midstream urine need to be catched. Culture and sensitivity test might be done, and urine chemistry, pyuria, proteinuria, hematuria and WBC count might be considered. So let us first look into the pH. pH actually indicates the acidity and alkalinity of the urine. The normal range of urine is around 4.5 to 8. So usually we find a value of around 6, which is acidic, which is a normal value for urine. Osmolarity, pinpoint fluid balance, that is normal 300 to 1200 milliosmoles per kg. It's an example, as urine osmolarity increases, urine volume decreases. Urine becomes more concentrated. So this actually leads into the supersaturation of urine. Also to consider the electrolytes, that is, they are not usually frequently measured in normal or routine urine analysis. But what it requires is a 24-hour specimen would be required whenever the person is urinating. We need to collect all of them and then measure it. Changes in urinary electrolyte highly suggest of renal impairment. Sodium extremely suggestive of type of acute renal failure. That is less than 20 milli equivalent per liter. That is, would be a pre-renal cause. And normal or high value would be 20 milliequivalent or more. Also we perform CCT, which is known as creatinine clearance test. It is a direct measure of glomerular filtration rate. We have discussed this in the section of renal function test, where we are considering clearance of creatinine to estimate the GFR. Kindly refer to the link to understand how creatinine measurement can lead into GFR. Best indication for overall kidney function, clearance expressed in ml per minute. It is normal is 90 to 139 ml per minute. For females it is 80 to 125 ml per minute. So this is the GFR. It is measured by completing a 24-hour urine with corresponding blood test for measurement of creatinine. That is, we compare both the content of creatinine in blood also in the urine. Serum creatinine is actually a byproduct of muscle metabolism. It appears in serum in amount proportional to body muscle mass, fluctuates little, excreted entirely by the kidneys, so there are no other excretory source from where the creatinine can come out. The normal value is around 0.7 to 1.5 milligram per deciliter. Reduced elderly and with low muscle mass. Creatinine more than 1.5 or more than 50% loss, or 4.8, 75% loss, and more than 10 leads to 90% loss of renal function. We have also understood BUN creatinine ratio in the section of renal function test, where the normal ratio lies between 6:1 to 20:1. When both BUN and creatinine level increases at the same rate, the ratio usually remains the normal, but it is suggestive of renal dysfunction. So we not only need to look into the ratio but also into the individual quantity of BUN and creatinine. When BUN rises faster than creatinine, that is the ratio will increase, it is more than 20:1. It is suggestive of dehydration, hypoperfusion, protein catabolism, and gastrointestinal bleeding. So if BUN is rising and creatinine remains constant, so following might be the conditions like dehydration, hypoperfusion, protein catabolism, and GI bleeding. The other diagnostic techniques are KUB, that is kidney, ureter, and bladder need to be observed. That is, first, like we don't have here we are not using any contrast technique. It actually shows stone stricture, calcification, and obstructions. Also, contrast like the IVP and IVU may be used as a series of X-ray after. That is, intravenous pyelography might be used. So a series of X-ray might be done after injecting a dye. That is to measure the size, shape, etc. of the kidneys. It also is used to detect the obstruction. So this dye might not flow further from the point of obstruction, and to also measure the masses. Client preparation and teaching important for nursing information. Other than that, we can go for angiogram, that is to inject contrast into the renal artery via femoral catheter. Visualize renal vascular is done, and to monitor the bleeding after the procedure. MRI might also be done, but this is a very expensive procedure. Cystogram, that is to contrast to bladder, to evaluate bladder and vesicourethral reflex, is also useful in cases of calculi present in the urinary bladder. Techniques of retrograde pyelogram, that is X-ray after contrast into the kidney, is also done. It is done by a cystoscope and urethral catheter placed into the renal pelvis. This diagram is showing how the renal pyelogram will look like. Ultrasound, where no dye is used. Cystoscopy is done, that is direct visualization of the bladder can be done. And biopsy is for the definitive diagnosis of the content of the renal calculi is also done. Now let us look into the management of renal calculi. It's the medical management and the surgical management. 85% of time it is possible to spontaneously pass a kidney renal calculi with urination. Stone larger than 6 mm will almost always require some form of intervention. However, assuming there is no high-grade obstruction or associated infection in urinary tract and symptoms are relatively mild, various non-surgical methods to encourage the passage of stone, like excessive drinking of water. In cases of pain, we need to administrate painkillers, that is NSAIDs or opioids. Also intravenous acetaminophen might also be helpful. As a part of dietary intervention, for the calcium stone, acid ash with limited intake of calcium and milk product is suggested. For oxalate stone, alkaline ash with limited intake of food high in oxalate is suggested. For uric acid stones, alkaline ash with limited intake of food high in purine should be avoided. A high fluid of 3000 ml per day, that is 3 liter per day or more than that after episode of urolithiasis to produce urine output of at least 2 liter per day is suggestive. Intravenous therapy, fluid replacement in cases of dehydration and activity as tolerated by the patient might be suggested. In cases of surgical management, invasive and non-invasive, both types of methods are available. Surgical management by non-invasive management like electrohydraulic lithotripsy, ultrasonic lithotripsy, laser impulse, extracorporeal shock wave lithotripsy, ECSWT, WIL. So this is a diagram showing how electrohydraulic lithotripsy is done. Extracorporeal shock wave lithotripsy, ESWL, is also used. In case of invasive management where we do invade into the body of the patient, percutaneous nephrolithotomy, cystolithopexy, pylolithotomy, that is incision into the renal pelvis, cystotomy, nephrotomy, and ureteroscopic surgery are also advised. How do we manage, or what are the suggestions that we need to give? First of all, it is suggested to maintain proper nutrition of the patient. Force fluid, that is, even if the patient is not thirsty, we need to advise him to take at least 3 liters of fluid per day. We also need to assess what is the renal function on a regular basis. We also monitor and record vital signs, urine output, input, daily weight, specific gravity, and lab studies and urine pH. Also to administer medication as prescribed, we have a number of medicines like Osimum can, Berberis vulgaris, Lycopodium, and number of medicines in homeopathy which could be helpful in this. Also, continuous straining urine and giving warm bath and warm soak to flank reduces the pain. How do we suggest the home care? That is to increase fluid during the hot season. Weather, illness and exercise. Avoid when urge is felt. Void when urge is felt. Ask the patient not to hold the urine for a long period of time. Also to test the urine for pH on a regular basis. And increase fluid at night and void frequently. That is to avoid. That was all about renal calculi. I hope you have understood how important renal calculi is. Thank you for listening.